I poured my soul into that house. Every tile, every light fixture, every inch of hardwood. I chose it, cleaned it, built it. It was supposed to be our forever home. So when I overheard my husband planning to sell it behind my back, I didn't scream. I smiled. Because I had already sold it, without him even knowing. By the time they sat down to draft the contract, the deed had already changed hands. The best part? I made them think it was their idea. You want betrayal? Fine. But don't be surprised when I rewrite the rules of revenge. The first time I saw the house, it looked like a skeleton. Rotting siding, boarded up windows, ivy strangling the porch beams. Mike stood beside me with a gleam in his eye and said, "Imagine what you could do with this." And I did. For the next 8 months, I poured everything into that place. My time, my savings, my skills. I sketched until my hands cramped, painted until my nails chipped, and laid flooring on my knees until they bruised. It wasn't just a renovation. It was a resurrection, a new life, a future. The neighbors watched from behind curtains as I climbed scaffolding alone. They'd wave. Sometimes they'd bring lemonade. No one ever asked if Mike helped. He didn't. He'd come by on weekends with a bottle of wine, smile, kiss me, say, "You're incredible," and then disappear again to handle business. I didn't mind. I wanted this to be mine. I wanted to make something beautiful and say, "I did this." On the final night after I installed the last recessed light and the entire house glowed like a boutique showroom, I stood in the center of the living room and stared up at the ceiling. I had saved one empty patch of drywall for something special. With a ladder and a fine-point gold Sharpie, I wrote in cursive above the fireplace, "The Hamiltons." I believed in permanence then. Our housewarming party was the kind of Pinterest-perfect evening people envy online. Wine flowed, candles flickered, and every surface sparkled. Mike's family arrived in pressed clothes, bringing fake smiles and backhanded compliments. His sister, Lila, gave me a once-over and said, "Wow, you actually made this place livable. Impressive. But you know, not everything we fix stays ours forever." She laughed, sipped her rosé, and turned away. I laughed too, but it caught in my throat. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she was just being her usual self. But that night, long after the guests left and Mike had passed out in our new king-size bed, I sat in the hallway and couldn't let it go. Something about her tone, her certainty. It itched under my skin. I went to the filing cabinet where we kept our house documents. He'd always been the one to handle the boring stuff, and I never questioned it. But I opened the folder anyway. Deed papers, mortgage info, renovation permits. I flipped through the pages once, then again slower, then with shaking fingers. My name wasn't on anything. I looked for my signature, a co-signer line, even a reference. Nothing. The deed listed Michael Hamilton as sole owner. The loan documents had been revised 6 months ago, right around the time he convinced me to trust him and not worry about legal stuff. He said, "What's mine is yours." And I'd believed him. I wasn't even on the property insurance. My breath caught. My vision blurred. I sat back, papers spread across my lap like shards of a broken mirror. In a daze, I went to our bedroom. Mike was asleep, mouth open slightly, face peaceful. I wanted to wake him, to scream, to ask him what the hell was going on, but I didn't. I stood in the doorway for a long time, then I turned around. The next morning, over coffee, I asked casually, "Hey, should we add me to the title sometime?" He blinked. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just in case something ever happened." He smiled. "Nothing's gonna happen, babe. You worry too much." I nodded, said nothing. That afternoon, as I scrolled through my email, one new message popped up from his real estate agent, mistakenly forwarded to my address. Subject line, "Final step before house transfer. Closing this Friday." I clicked it open. They were selling the house, our house, the one I rebuilt from the studs up, and I wasn't even part of the conversation. The betrayal didn't make me cry. Not right away. It made me efficient, cold, focused in a way I hadn't been since grad school. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I'd become one. I stopped speaking unnecessarily. I smiled when expected. I let them think I was naive. The next morning, Mike left for a strategy weekend with some colleagues, no doubt to celebrate the upcoming sale behind my back. I waited 30 minutes after he drove off, then opened the hallway closet and pulled out the small black case I'd hidden months ago. A set of compact security cameras and audio bugs. It took less than an hour to install them in every common room. One behind the bookshelf in the living room, one inside a lamp in the kitchen. 2 in the hallway angled toward the office. The software synced directly to my laptop. As I watched the live feeds flicker to life, I felt something strange. Control. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. Just awareness. That night I heard them, Mike on the phone, laughing. She doesn't even know she signed a few things for tax reasons. I've got it all in my name. Easiest investment flip of the decade. I stared at the screen in silence, jaw locked. I replayed the audio 3 times. His voice didn't even shake. No guilt, no hesitation. Something cracked inside me. Later that week, I returned to one of the older walls in the attic. During the renovation, I had saved the frame behind that section because it had a peculiar engraving, an odd geometric symbol etched into a stud. At the time, I'd assumed it was decorative, but now, looking closer, I saw a tiny, nearly invisible QR code embedded inside the pattern. I scanned it. The link led to an encrypted financial vault. The login page displayed a name I hadn't heard in months, Robert Hamilton, Mike's father. Robert had always liked me. He called me the only one in this family with any grit. He died 3 years before the wedding, long before this house ever became a project. So why would a QR code hidden inside a wall connect to him? My heart pounded as I entered a few obvious passwords. None worked. Then I typed in a phrase he'd once said to me at Thanksgiving, a toast. May you build more than you inherit. The vault opened. Inside, a portfolio of cryptocurrency assets, Ethereum, Bitcoin, a few obscure tokens, with a total value of just over $417,000. Every wallet dated back at least 7 years. The final note, for whoever rebuilds what I once ruined. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't just money, this was intentional. He'd hidden it for someone like me, someone who didn't just patch walls, but rebuilt them with purpose. The next day, I created an LLC, a design consulting firm technically, but its purpose was different. The company, Gilded Frame LLC, opened a new business account and quietly secured a short-term mortgage, using the house as collateral. A loophole made possible through obscure tax zoning allowed a legal reverse lease on properties under restoration, which meant I could essentially lend the house to the company. No red flags, no alarms. Within a week, the house, my house, was now temporarily leased to Gilded Frame LLC, and I was the sole owner of that company. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I set up a fake buyer inquiry using a third-party agent. The agent scheduled a meeting with the current property holder, Mike, and sent over a basic sales interest letter. Mike replied immediately. Hungry, eager, greedy, the documents flowed, appraisals, listing estimates, buyer qualifications, all coordinated by my company's representative, a name he didn't recognize, a signature I had created. My plan was ridiculous, bold, almost illegal, but not quite. It danced on the edge of law, like jazz on a tightrope. Then came the email. Subject line, Transaction Review Meeting, Gilded Frame LLC Body. You are invited to attend a meeting with the interested buyer of the Hamilton property, currently held by Michael Hamilton, hosted by Gilded Frame LLC, scheduled for Friday, 11 a.m. Address, our house. I stared at the screen for a long time. They had no idea. They were preparing to sell the house to a buyer who didn't exist, a company they'd never met, that I created, funded, controlled, and now they were about to walk through the front door and try to sell my house. To me. Mike came home beaming. He tossed his keys on the counter, kissed my cheek, and poured 2 glasses of wine like a man who thought he was in control. I played along. "I heard the buyer's really serious," I said lightly. "Very. We're going to make a nice profit, babe. And when it closes, I'll make sure you're taken care of." I smiled, wide and hollow. "I trust you." He had no idea how carefully I was watching him. Every word, every pause, every lie. A few days later, I told him I wanted to help with the legal side of things. "You always do the paperwork," I said sweetly. "Let me feel like a real partner." He looked suspicious for a second. Then he smirked. "Sure. Actually, the lawyer just sent over a few forms, mostly boilerplate. You just have to witness my signature." I took the documents from him with the same reverence I once reserved for wedding vows. What he didn't realize was that I'd already been in touch with the law office. The real forms were in my email. These, what he handed me, were copies I'd tampered with. On the surface, it looked like standard sale paperwork, but buried on page 4 was a small clause, in dense legalese, authorizing transfer of secondary intangible assets, including intellectual property and inherited digital holdings from Michael Hamilton to Gilded Frame LLC, effective immediately upon signature. He didn't read it, not even a glance. He signed while texting. "Bureaucracy," he muttered. "All this for a house." I initialed the bottom, dated it, slipped it back into the folder, and just like that, the trap closed. I spent the next day in my office uploading the signed document into the crypto vault. The system required 2 factors to trigger full access. 1, proof of renovation completed, which I had in photographs and receipts, and 2, legal ownership transfer from any Hamilton heir to a third-party entity. Done. Executed. At 6:47 p.m., a soft chime pinged on my screen. Ownership verification complete. Digital assets unlocked. I stared at the number, $417,000.03. I clicked transfer and moved the entire amount into a new wallet under Gilded Frame's account. The screen refreshed. Balance $0. I leaned back, chest tight, not with fear, but with something colder, cleaner, power. Mike noticed nothing. That week, he was busy preparing for the buyer meeting. He bragged to Lila about how he'd finessed the value. He joked with his mother that Emily has no idea. They still thought I was a spectator. Friday morning arrived. Everyone showed up in business casual. Mike wore a button-up and brought a briefcase he didn't need. Lila flounced in with a folder labeled Projected Profit Breakdown. His mother carried nothing but a face full of smugness. They waited in the living room as my attorney entered, pretending to represent Gilded Frame LLC. He shook hands, smiled politely, and began the meeting. "Before we proceed," he said, "there's a final transfer confirmation required." He handed Mike a tablet. On the screen, the sale agreement, the revised title, and an acknowledgement of pre-existing asset reassignment. Mike skimmed. His smile faltered. "What's this line about digital holdings?" "It's a standard clause," my attorney said smoothly. "You already signed off last week." Mike looked at me. I raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said it was just bureaucracy." He said nothing. After the meeting, they left in a huddle of whispers. I stayed behind. The next morning, an alert hit Mike's phone. Then Lila's, then his mother's. Transfer complete. Ownership reassigned. Then came the email from the bank. Title change recorded. Mortgage satisfied. Funds settled. They had sold the house without knowing to someone who didn't exist. And now it belonged to a company they couldn't trace. One that had emptied their digital inheritance, reclaimed the rights to the design, and turned every dollar into a sealed ledger under my control. They had no leverage, no claim, no recourse. Hours later, I climbed onto the rooftop, barefoot, wind whipping through my hair. I set my phone's timer, framed the shot, one photo, just one. Me holding the house key in the air, grinning. Caption, "Good luck explaining that." Then I hit send. They filed the lawsuit 2 days after the key photo. Fraud, coercion, theft, every term they could throw against me, they did. The emails came first, then the official summons. I wasn't surprised. I was ready. My attorney smiled when he read the claims. "This'll be fun," he said. "They're walking into their own ambush." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Beige walls, humming fluorescents, no audience except a clerk and a tired judge. But to me, it might as well have been a theater. Mike took the stand first, all charm and wounded pride. "She tricked me," he said. "She used my signature without consent." Lila followed, parroting the same story, sprinkling in lies about mental instability and obsessive behavior. Their mother simply shook her head, silent and solemn, like a queen betrayed. When it was my turn, I didn't blink. I handed the judge a flash drive and a thick folder. "Your Honor," I said calmly, "these are time-stamped video files, recorded with full consent, audio logs, and original contracts, each document notarized." The judge opened the folder. "This is extensive." "Yes," I said, "because I knew they'd try this." The footage played. Mike bragging about flipping the house, laughing about my ignorance, signing documents without reading. His voice, clear as glass. "She signed a few things for tax reasons. I've got it all in my name." I watched their faces crack in real time. Then came the final blow. "I'd also like to submit a private addendum," I said, placing a sealed envelope on the table. "It's from Robert Hamilton, dated 2 years ago." The judge opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a signed legal document. "To whom it may concern, if this house ever becomes a battleground for greed, know this. It is to belong not to my son, but to the one who brings it back to life, the one who sees a future in ruins, the one who makes it home again, Robert Hamilton." Attached was a deed addendum, unfiled but legally valid, with a clause stating, "In the event of a renovation exceeding 60% structural overhaul, executed solely by Emily Carson, the property is to transfer to her name in full." The room went silent. Mike leaned forward. "That's fake." The judge raised an eyebrow. "It's notarized by your father's estate attorney, dated and witnessed." Lila muttered something. Their mother looked away. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. I let the silence grow roots. Verdict. Case dismissed. Ownership upheld. Sanctions recommended for malicious prosecution. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. I hadn't expected media, but someone had tipped them off. A local reporter shoved a mic toward me. "Miss Carson, is it true you now legally own the entire estate?" I gave them nothing. Just a quiet nod. But the final performance hadn't started yet. That evening, I received a call from the executor of Robert's estate. "There's one more thing," he said. "The real will." Apparently, the document read at Robert's funeral had been a condensed version. The official will, kept sealed for legal reasons, had just been cleared. I met them at the law office. Inside, 2 lawyers sat with solemn faces. They handed me a letter and a second envelope. The letter was short. "Emily, if you're reading this, they tried to take what you built, and I knew they would. That house was never a gift. It was a test, one they failed, one you passed. Use it well. Robert." The second envelope contained a notarized copy of his real will. Mike received nothing. No assets, no property, no investment accounts. Instead, everything, home, land, digital portfolios, legacy holdings, transferred to Emily Carson Hamilton for services rendered in good faith. The following week, a second courtroom was booked, this time for official property reassignment. Mike, Lila, and their mother sat across the table, stiff and stone-faced. The cameras were there again. A quiet buzz filled the air. One by one, the documents were signed. The estate lawyer read aloud, "All property rights, responsibilities, and liabilities associated with the Hamilton home and its attached assets are hereby transferred to sole ownership of Emily Carson Hamilton." I signed last. When the final pen stroke hit paper, I stood, smoothed my coat, turned to leave, and without a word, I walked away. The house was quiet. No more contractors shouting measurements, no smell of fresh paint or sawdust, no whispered schemes behind closed doors, just silence, thick and total. It should have been peace, but it felt like vacuum. I wandered from room to room, barefoot, coffee in hand, eyes tracing the details I had once obsessed over, the crown molding I fought to preserve, the custom tile I'd laid piece by piece, grout staining my fingers, the sunken living room with the reclaimed wood beams, each one selected like a lover. I had won. Everyone said so. Reporters asked for interviews. Online forums called me the wife who outplayed the sharks. My inbox filled with congratulations. And yet, every night I sat at the kitchen island staring at 2 empty wine glasses, one mine, one untouched. Sometimes I spoke aloud, pretending Mike was still across from me. He rarely said anything useful even when he was here, but I missed the noise, the illusion, the fight. One evening I found myself scrubbing the same patch of floor for almost an hour. There was a scuff mark, a tiny groove in the hardwood, left from the time I dropped a box of tiles and cursed for 10 straight minutes, while Mike laughed. Back then it was funny. Now it bled. I started sleeping in the guest room. The master suite felt too vast, like a stage I wasn't ready to walk onto. I ate frozen meals, wore the same sweatshirt for days, walked around aimlessly at 3 a.m. because the silence screamed too loud to ignore. Then one night, I dreamed of Robert. He stood at the foot of the bed, wearing the same plaid shirt he always wore when he gardened. Dirt on his hands. That half smile of his. "You did good, kid," he said. I sat up, confused. "But I feel empty." He looked around the room. "You got the house." "Yeah," I whispered. "But I lost everything else." Robert knelt down, tracing his hand across the same scuff in the wood I'd scrubbed. This place was never about walls or windows. It was about fight. You won the battle, but you're not done building yet. He looked at me, eyes softer now. "You won, Emily, but are you happy?" I woke up crying. That morning, I didn't make coffee. I just sat at the dining table and stared at the fireplace, the one with the Hamiltons still faintly visible above the mantel. I'd forgotten to paint over it. Or maybe I hadn't. I don't know how long I sat there. The fire started around noon. I smelled it first. Burnt wood, sharp and alarming. I ran upstairs, heart in my throat, and found smoke curling out from the studio. The studio, the very first room I'd renovated. The room with the skylight and the pale green walls and the antique mirror I'd spent 2 weeks restoring. The fire didn't spread far. The alarm system triggered. Sprinklers hissed. By the time the fire department arrived, the blaze had confined itself to one room. Just one. I stood outside barefoot, arms wrapped around myself as they doused the last embers. The firefighters gave me nods of sympathy and jargon I couldn't process. Electrical short. Overloaded wiring, nothing suspicious, but it felt personal. After they left, I walked into the studio. The walls were blackened. The mirror was shattered. But in the corner, half buried under a collapsed shelf, was a brick. One of the original bricks from the chimney I had taken apart myself, now scorched and cracked. I picked it up, still warm, still heavy, still mine. I sat on the floor and cradled it like a child. Later that night, I found an old voicemail from my mother, one I'd never deleted. "You know, sweetheart," she said, her voice tinny through the speaker, "you can win the argument and still lose yourself. Don't let your victories turn to ashes." The line cracked with static. "Don't let the fire inside you burn everything you touch. Some battles aren't worth the smolder. Some houses are meant to be lived in, others to be let go." I played it twice, then 3 times, and I understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about ownership or justice or even legacy. It was about space and silence and knowing when a house stops being a home. I stared at the studio door for a long time that night, the frame still charred, the room beyond it dark and gutted. But something in me felt lighter, like the fire had burned more than wood. It had burned guilt, grief, regret, and left behind only the truth. Selling the house was easier than I thought. I listed it with a short description. No fluff, no nostalgia, Just a simple line: fully renovated with love and lessons. Make it your own. It went under contract in less than a week. The buyers were a quiet couple expecting their first child. They walked through the rooms in silence, pausing at the fireplace, the staircase, the faint trace of the Hamilton still visible above the mantel. I didn't bother painting over it. That name no longer meant anything to me. Or rather, it meant something else now. Something I had outgrown. When the check cleared, I didn't keep the money. I transferred the full amount, minus taxes and legal fees, into a new account under the name of a nonprofit, the Blueprint Project, a program for women like me, women who'd poured themselves into homes they never truly owned, women who were promised love but given silence, promised stability but handed storms, women who, like me, needed to build again, but this time for themselves. I rented a small workshop on the edge of town. Nothing glamorous, just concrete floors, drafty windows, and potential. I filled it with tools, drafting tables, coffee machines, and cheap rugs that felt like home. Then I posted the application online, looking for women who want to rebuild houses, lives, anything. No experience needed, just heart. The response was overwhelming. One by one, they came. Some with bruises, some with baby strollers, some with eyes that hadn't sparkled in years. And together we built things. Small at first, a birdhouse, a shelf, then a full shed, then walls, then dreams. I taught them how to use drills, how to measure trim, how to run wiring safely. We laughed when things went wrong. We cried when things went right. Each blueprint we designed had a tiny symbol in the corner, a small blackened brick. Not labeled, not explained, but it was there. The burned piece of my past, immortalized. Sometimes they'd ask, "What's this mark mean?" And I'd just smile and say, "It's where the real building begins." Months passed. The workshop turned into a movement. Donations came in, media caught wind. We were featured in a local paper, "The Woman Who Rebuilt More Than Walls." That headline made me laugh, not because it wasn't true, but because it was finally true for the right reasons. Then one afternoon I got a message. A woman named Jo, late 30s, mother of 2, recently divorced. She'd been kicked out of her house by her ex-husband, told she wasn't useful anymore. "I want to learn," she wrote. "I want to build again." She showed up the next day in worn jeans and a jacket 2 sizes too big. She held her coffee like a shield. She didn't speak much, but when she picked up a hammer for the first time, she gripped it like she'd waited her whole life to swing. I watched her from across the room, quietly, carefully, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a woman who'd lost something. I felt like someone who had passed something on. A few weeks later, Jo pulled me aside. "I found this property," she said. "It's not much, just a shell, but it's cheap, and it's mine." She handed me the deed, paid in full with her own savings. She was nervous, scared. "Will you help me design it?" she asked. I said yes. That became our biggest project yet. We worked side by side, me sketching, her sawing, both of us learning each other's rhythm. She chose every paint color, every fixture, every window pane. And when we were done, she invited the rest of the group over for tea in her new kitchen. As they walked through the front door, someone whispered, "It smells like fresh hope in here." But I knew my work wasn't finished. There was one more house I needed to see. I drove out of town, past the suburbs, past the wealth, into a modest neighborhood where the houses leaned a little with age, but stood tall all the same. There it was, a small one-story structure, white siding, green shutters, a porch swing hanging by one good chain. I stepped inside, no marble, no custom cabinetry, just bare floors, clean air, and space. Enough. I spent weeks making it mine, not perfect, not curated, just real. I repainted the walls in quiet colors, hung thrift store art, installed shelves that leaned slightly to the left. And when it was done, I stood at the threshold with a Sharpie in my hand. This time, no cursive, just bold, steady print. I built this one for me. Then I closed the door behind me,